Здравейте! Вие гледате Абсолютно свободно. Аз съм Петър Волгин. Днес формата на предаването ще бъде по-различен, защото това ще бъде едно интервю. Интервю с евродепутата Фернанд Картайзер, който е от Люксембург, избран от Люксембург. Той доскоро беше част от парламентарната група на Европа, Европейските консерватори и реформисти, но беше изгонен от тази група. Защо? Защото си позволи да пътува за Москва, да има срещи в Руската дума с руски депутати и още преди да замине от Европейските консерватори и реформисти му казаха, че ако отиде, ще бъде изключен от групата. Той обаче отиде, върна се, имаше срещи, върна се и беше изключен от групата и в момента е независим депутат. Hello, Mr. Kартайзер.
Hello, Peter.
Okay, you were expelled from the ECR group because of your trip to Moscow and your meetings there with Russian deputies. And this behavior of your former colleagues, your former parliamentary group, is completely in line with the politics of leadership of the European Parliament, not to hold any talks with Russia. And I wonder, is it possible to work for peace when one doesn't talk to the main protagonist in this conflict? How do you explain this behavior?
Well, to answer your second question, of course it's not possible to work for peace if you don't talk to the other side. I think that's very clearly a deficit of our European policy that we have for the time being on the high level, and it's something that is specific to Europe. We have to see that all other regions, all other countries in the world have relations with Russia. Even the United States, since President Trump's arrival in the White House, have contacts, regular contacts, openly and discreetly with the Russian Federation. The only exception is the European Union. And within the European Union, there are only a few prime ministers like Mr. Orban, Mr. Fico, who have the courage to have relations also with the Russians. All the others abstain from that. I think that's a very, very negative attitude because you can never achieve any progress.
What is your explanation of this attitude? Why do they restrain from talking?
Well, I think that they have a problem with credibility. There are several issues behind this. The first one is basically they are the same political class that was there when President Biden came to office, and they decided at that moment to confront Russia, and they have problems probably with changing their attitude in order not to lose credibility vis-à-vis the public opinion. The United States could do that because a new president came and he could also then change his policy line. But in Europe, we are demonizing Russia now for many years already, and it would be strange for Mr. Macron or for the others to say, well, actually, we have to adapt also our attitude. So there's a problem of political flexibility and political honesty. But there is also this kind of strange theory that has been developed that Ukraine would be the first line of defense of the European Union threatened by a Russian attack or whatever. I cannot see any indication to that direction. I think it's a pure fiction, but a fiction that is used by the European central institutions to grab power. The Commission uses this situation of crisis, of tension, to try to federalize Europe even further, to get competencies in the defense sector, to turn the European Union in a defense alliance, to make a geopolitical project out of an economic and a peace project as it at the European Union started years ago. So we assist now to different interests within the European Union, and I think the most dangerous one for all of us, for Bulgaria, Luxembourg and all the sovereign states that make up the European Union, the most dangerous one is that we have a centralization of power and defense competences on a non-democratically controlled level, and that is the European Commission.
Could it be changed? Because it's clear that under the current leadership of the European Union, under the current majority in the European Parliament, the anti-Russian hysteria will continue. But could we do something about that?
Oh, well, you have a problem of political courage in that. And there are, of course, interest, as always in politics. Once the leading class is fixing the line of thought, most people just follow in order not to threaten their careers or whatever, not to be seen as outsiders or threatening the system and suffering the consequences of this. So we have a problem of, I would say, vassalization. I don't know whether this is absolutely correct in English, but the European Union has been, since the beginning of the Biden era, really just and only following the American line. And now with President Trump, they're completely submitted on trade issues, on defense issues, and so on to American interests. So on the level of heads of state and government in the European Union, we see that they are basically submitting to the United States. And within the European Union, we see also that the political parties within the European Parliament are so that who normally should have a lively debate among themselves and represent public their citizens and public opinion and reflect all the different currents in the European Union and in our societies. They are not doing that. They are also just following what their leaders are saying. And this indicates that our democracies have a problem. They are not lively enough. The elected parliamentarians often do not do what people expect from them, defend their interest, but they are following the interest of others, actually, that are dictated from above. And I think that's very worrisome, actually, for the future of our democratic cultures.
And what is the peace formula for Ukraine? Is there anyone? What can be done to stop the war?
Well, there are actually only two choices, I think. The first one, if we are not engaging in negotiations with the Russian Federation, well, I think that the conflict will be settled on the battlefield. So there will be a Russian victory, and the Russians will basically determine the rules of the post-war Ukraine. They will dictate the situation, because we do not have any military means that would allow us, if we wanted, I would anyhow not want to do that, but to engage Russia on the battlefield. So we have no choice. I mean, if we are not engaging in peace negotiations now, we are coming at a certain point to a situation where the Russians are determining what is going to happen. Now, if we are going to enter into peace negotiations, what I hope really, then we have to, of course, have contacts with the Kremlin, engage with our Russian counterparts on the heads of government, foreign ministers, and so on. And instead of demonizing Russia, we would have to come to talking terms again. And this is something which seems extremely difficult to do on the European Union side, because we have also personnel problems. We have Mrs. Callas, who is actively agitating against Russians. I think she has a problem of hatred also against Russia. At least that is what perceives from her statements. So it will be very difficult with the kind of political personnel also that we have for the time being to change this. And as I told you before, there are clearly interests in Europe in order to prolong a situation of conflict, because it is a gain for the European Commission and for some states that are heavily depending also in military industrial projects, because they might expect to have some advantages from the current situation. The normal people certainly don't. The people in Bulgaria don't, the people in Luxembourg don't, and I think we should draw their attention to this situation. They have to wake up and to say no to this war, no to power grabbing by the European Commission, but yes to a strengthening again of European democracies, and yes to peaceful coexistence in Europe, because that is what serves us best.
On your initiative, a meeting was held between European MEPs and deputies from the Russian Duma. It was yesterday. I briefly talked about this meeting on Facebook and TikTok, so viewers can look at my pages for more information. What were your motives for organizing this event?
Well, I think that there are many.
It was extremely difficult to organize such an event.
Well, that difficulty should not be an issue. I mean, it's just important to do it, because we have. It's almost, as far as I know for the moment, with the exception of Prime Minister Orban and Prime Minister Fico, who are going also to Moscow, as far as I know, it's the only channel of communication for the moment between, there are sometimes diplomatic initiatives, but when diplomatic initiatives are taken from the European side, generally they are negative towards Russia. So we had a démarche a few days ago, and there were some representatives from European countries going to Moscow, but again to threaten. But on the positive side, there is almost nothing. And I think that what we are doing here in the European Parliament, the few MEPs who are committed to dialogue, is something extremely important, because we are the huge exception in Europe for the time being, in a climate that is really oriented towards confrontation, towards war speech, towards, I don't know what negative evolutions you might choose. We have it. But we are the exception, actually. We try to establish a dialogue. We try to maintain contact with our Russian counterparts, and also to build, to pose maybe a first brick for future construction of a better relationship again. So we are the ones, I think, that are currently trying not to break off all relations with our Russian neighbors. I think it's actually, if we consider the worldwide situation, I told you that Europe is the big exception. Europe is the only continent or political structure that has not any dialogue with the Russian Federation. So it's even more important that within Europe and within the European institutions, some people do the contrary and make a symbolic gesture towards the Russians and towards our European citizens to say, no, we do not want that. We are aware of the importance of keeping up the dialogue and the contact.
In my opinion, one of the main questions is whether Russia wants to restore its good relations with the European Union, or it is just the opposite, that Russia has given up the idea of and completely reorientated his attitude towards Asia and toward India and toward China. What do you think about this?
Well, I think that the Russians are perfectly well aware of what happens here in the European Union. They are very, very well informed. I think that it's obvious also, but they know about details and the political situation in each and every country. They are well informed. And for the time being, they have no other choice than to turn also to the BRICS countries and to reinforce their relations with other countries in the world. We pushed them to do them because we broke off all the economic relations, energy relations, whatever there was in the past. Almost everything has been terminated, but by our choice, through sanctions and through just political decisions. So the Russians, of course, they turn to China, they turn to India. And for us, it means that even if the time comes when we re-establish relations with Russia, it will not be easy because, for instance, their fossil fuel, of which we would be dependent normally, goes to China probably in a very large amount of it. So I don't know on how far we can again perhaps enter that market when this hysteria is over. So structurally things have changed. We have lost the Russian market in the car industry. For instance, Chinese cars are now entering Russia. And in many different fields, actually, we have cut off, probably for good or for many years, good opportunities for our European companies. So we did something, in my eyes, which is also economically absolutely not forgivable. Politically, of course, with all the risks and war talk that we have, but also a purely economic approach. What we did is absolutely amazingly stupid, if I can say it like this, honestly, among us. And I cannot see how we could do that. Also, on the financial field, I'm interested in this because, as you know, Luxembourg is an important financial center in Europe. And we see now that the seizure of the Russian assets, the frozen assets, and maybe also this kind of structures that Mrs. von der Leyen wants to set up in order to give loans to Ukraine, actually, to put it simply, to give Russian money to Ukraine, will undermine the credibility of Europe as a financial center. So I expect Arab countries in Asia, whatever, and whoever would like to invest his money to withdraw it from Europe. So we are also on the economic field and on the financial field, we are weakening Europe for good, for decades actually.
Let's talk about the hysteria now, anti-Russian hysteria, because every day there are informations about drones, planes, and we've been told that, of course, they are Russian. And what do you think? Do you think that people like Ursula and Kaya, they really want to drag Europe into the war, or they just want to benefit their friends from the arm industry?
I don't, of course, know what they are thinking, what they are doing. I just can criticize what they are doing, because that's the thing. I don't know the thought behind. But I think that they do not want to go as far as war, because they know that we are militarily and otherwise not prepared for war. We are in a situation where Russia is militarily much stronger than us, and where the United States withdraw, at least to some extent, from Europe, so we don't know in how much they would honor their commitments under the NATO agreement and so on. So it's too uncertain. So I don't think that they want to go to war, but I think that they want to go as far as possible and to maintain this climate of crisis and hysteria, just in order, as I told you, to reinforce the power to force Europe, to abandon the principle of unanimous decisions, to go to qualified majorities that they can control. And it's a power game, a dangerous power game. But the big question behind that, when this time of hysteria and irrationality that we are knowing for the time being is over, and it will come to an end at some point, what is going to happen to the European Union when people awake, when they are not exposed to the same kind of censorship that what we have now, and that we have only one opinion in the media that is tolerated? All this at some point will come to an end. And what will then be the attitude of the people in Bulgaria, in Luxembourg, all over Europe, when they look at the dangers in which we have been brought without any reason, actually, the power grabbing that has been made, the massive violation of the treaties that our parliaments have ratified, and we see all this. So what will be the future of the European Union that has been used and abused in order to violate the rights of member states?
Do you believe that there could be a big change in the European Union?
Well, I'm in favor of the European Union. I think we need the European Union. But honestly, I don't know, but I consider the possibility that the European Union, as a consequence of what it has been doing now, has to undergo tremendous changes. So I do not hope that it will come to an end, because I think we are all actually a family of nations, and we need economic cooperation and monetary cooperation and so on, and also political coordination. But I don't know whether we can accept that we have a structure in Europe that has reinforced its power without mandates, without democratic mandate, and has constructed a crisis in order to get more power. So I think there must be consequences, and of course those who are now cooperating in this kind of coup d'etat from above, this power grabbing from above without democratic legitimation, we cannot uphold those structures. Also, we had many neutral countries in Europe. Their neutrality is simply ignored. Austria, Ireland. I mean, they are all put in this kind of war machine and so on, and with no respect to what the people expressed in referenda. In Ireland several times, or in Austria when they joined the European Union, the conditions was clearly the European Union is not a military alliance. Now they transform it into a military alliance. So even the history and the specific situations of a number of member states is simply ignored.
And at the end of our conversation, Mr. Kартайзер, one question that you can take as a joke, or maybe you can take it seriously.
That depends.
Maybe some of the viewers know that in the 80s, you worked for both the Soviet GRU and the CIA. And could you make a comparison? Which intelligence was better?
Well, actually, it was a little bit different. I was asked by the CIA to try to infiltrate in some sort the GRU, that was the military secret service of the Soviet Union, Because they tried to recruit me, and so I worked as a double agent, but clearly I was there and worked for the CIA and for our Luxembourg secret service, the Shrel. So that was the situation. I'm not working both sides, and try to play one against the other. That's not my kind of. But I was a military officer in the Cold War, and I was asked to do that. So I did my duty. That was, in my eyes, it was my duty in order to work against the Soviet Union, which in those days were the enemies. And since I was a military officer, well, I did what I have been asked to do. But I had never, even in those days where we had clearly an enemy with the Iron Curtain in Europe, and Bulgaria was also one of these
from the other side.
From the other side, I had a lot of contacts, of course, with Soviet agents in those days, and I met all kinds of people there. I had many people of whom I was really afraid, but I had to do my job, and others who were extremely cultivated, nice people, also in the military secret service of the Soviet Union, and with whom I could discuss about Russian literature, and we had sometimes very strange discussions, and I enjoyed it a lot. I discussed with agents who are in reality my enemies, but we discussed Dostoevsky and so on, and it was often surrealistic, but very nice in a way. I never had, even during the Cold War, I never had feelings of hatred, of animosity. I mean, you do your duty as an officer, but you should not hate anybody. I never hated them. And I was happy when the Soviet Union collapsed, because in those days I thought, finally we can all live together without being enemies anymore, as a European family, including Russia, including those who were, until recently, my opponents in the Secret Service. It was a happiness because everybody became free at a certain moment. And now I see that this kind of heritage of the revolutions in the East, of the independence, is betrayed by the European Union. Because what we gained at this moment is this feeling of European family in freedom and harmony, actually, what it was.
It doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't exist anymore. Russia, when it became, when the Soviet Union collapsed, that Russia became a sovereign state as Russia, they tried to join the European Union at some point. They even wanted to join NATO. And people don't know this, but every time it was the West that said, no, that we don't want, because then you would be too powerful, in our structure. So it was always the refusal of these good intentions. And I always said it is wrong, because if we really want to build a family of nations in Europe, well, of course, Russia is belonging to us. And nowadays we see that it's totally the contrary. And I must say, when we talk to the Russians, I always tell them that for me, it is very clear that there is no difference, that we should trust each other, that we should try to build relations, because for me there is no opponent on the other side. There are partners, there are people with whom we have to build a future together, even if it's difficult for the time being.
Thank you so much, Фернанд Картайзер. Това беше евродепутата Фернанд Картайзер, с когото говорихме в нашето предаване Абсолютно свободно.